Hey, y'all, what's up? Coach Paul here. God has qualified me. This is Move Mondays, and you have greatness in you. Now, before we get to talking about that greatness, y'all know I got to say what I always say. Watch this. If you don't move that person, those people, those places, those things, those thoughts, those ideas, and or those ways, Coach Paul promises you this. They are definitely going to move you. And you don't want to move where they're going to move you to. All right. Please. All right. Watch my nugget for the week. As I told y'all, I will be dropping nuggets. And watch this nugget for the week. Now, we live in a world where we are taught now. Live your truth. If you believe it, it's right. If you say it, it's right. If you think it, it's right. If you do it, it's right. Everybody right. Everybody is right. But watch this. If everybody is right, why does the word wrong even exist? Or was we even wrong for making that word? I'm going to leave that there. Y'all marinate on it. Let's get into the content of the day. Wow. As I was thinking about subject matter for the day, the content of the day, give me a second. It brought me to a place of thinking about one of the first and greatest recordings or examples of greatness. And it came from a person whose name is Noah. Many of us, even, watch this, even many of us who say we don't believe in God, we still recognize the account of people like Noah, Moses, and a couple of others. But I want to talk about Noah today and how he exemplified, again, in the very early on of what greatness really looks like. Because greatness has a look. Watch this. I remember something that my mother said that she had to mention to one of her sisters. I won't go off into the entire conversation that they had, but one of the things she said to her sister is, if that's what you really were, or if that's who you really are, you wouldn't have to say it. People would see it. Okay. Now, one of the first things about Noah was strange, according to the rest of society, according to the rest of the world. What do I mean by that? He stood out rather than fit it in. He stood out. He didn't do everything that he saw everybody doing. He didn't do everything that was called, this is the trend. This is what's trending. This is what's going on. This is what everybody is doing now. Noah didn't do that. In spite of, watch this, the people who were doing what it is that they were doing and watching Noah do totally the opposite in those days, and even today, you consider strange. You are considered to be strange when you're not doing what everybody else is doing. But watch this, y'all. Greatness is going to call for you to stand out rather than fit in. I talked about it on one of my last episodes. So that's the first thing. Noah was strange according to the rest of society, because in the communities that he dwelled in and frequented, he wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. Greatness. Watch this. And even in spite of, because you have to believe that if he stood out in that way, people were actually pointing fingers and ridiculing him. And even in the midst of doing all of that, he still didn't give in to the pressures of what people, watch this, thought he should be or said that he should be and do what other people was doing. He still stood out. Greatness is going to call for you to do that. People, please hear this. Your greatness in many situations in your life is going to call for you to stand out and not do what everybody else is doing. I don't care how popular it is, because one of the things is for sure, the things that are popular with the masses are usually unpopular with God and or your greatness. Somebody better catch that. Now, the second thing about Noah that exemplified greatness in him, and I think that this is the first thing, I should have spoke about that first, because this is very important. Watch this. He was called by God. Let me explain something to you, people. God is not calling you because you don't have greatness. Woo, excuse me. I had to burp on that one. God is not calling you because you don't have greatness. He's calling you because it's in you. You know, they say they used to have a commercial, and I forgot the rest of the commercial, but I remember they used to say, it's in there. It's in there. Yeah, that greatness is in there. That's one of the reasons why God called you. And I talked about it before. Watch this. We all have greatness inside of us because God blew the breath of life into us and we became a living being. Now, I say that because this is how I understand that we have greatness, is because God put some of him in us. I'm going to leave that right there. Here's the other thing that exemplifies the greatness that was in Noah. What God had called Noah to do, y'all better catch this, he wasn't qualified. What God had called Noah to do, he wasn't qualified to do. He had done nothing in his life in terms of a career, a ministry, the way he fashioned himself with his children, his wife. He had done nothing that spoke to what it was that God had called him to. Y'all better catch that. I said it before. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And so part of your greatness, God going to call you and tell you to do some strange stuff. I know this for a fact from my own experiences, because this thing that I'm doing right now, when God had put this upon my heart, when God had put this in my spirit, I was like, who? I made, watch this. I made every excuse. My name should have been Moses. Because I made every excuse. I came up with every excuse possible as to why you was wrong, God. I should be, you got the wrong person. I should be doing something else. But this is what he called me to do. Okay, so again, Noah wasn't qualified, but God qualifies who he calls. That's another one. Here's another point that spoke to his greatness. Greatness is going to cause for you to be consistent and committed. They talk about the building of that ark took a minimum of 50 years and upwards of 125. Somewhere in between those two, a minimum of 50 to 125 years that it took to build this ark to its fullness and its completeness. And guess what? He stayed committed and he stayed consistent to that. Why do I say that? Because many of us, when God calls us and qualifies us to do whatever it is he has called us to do in terms of our greatness, our calling, our purpose, and his plans for us, many of us get this misconception in our mind that we're supposed to get this done right now, right today. that it's supposed to happen right now because God said it. And in many cases, that's not the case. When you think about King David, it took him many years, but he was called to be the king, but it took him many years to take that seat. Same thing with his son Solomon. Solomon was called when he was a teenager. Took him many years to take that seat. And so in turn, and when it relates to your greatness and my greatness and the things that God has called us to be able to speak to the greatness that he put inside of us, many times it's going to take time for it to happen. Say it like this. Watch this. You got an apple seed, it's an apple tree inside of that seed, right? This is an apple seed. It's actually a tree inside of that seed. When you put that seed in the ground on Saturday, you are not going to have an entire apple tree blossomed on Sunday morning. It's not going to happen. Here's the bad part about that, or the messed up part about it. I'm not going to call it bad, but this is a misconception that we have, is that and many of us expect, because God had said it, that tomorrow morning we're supposed to wake up and have a whole apple tree. And when we don't have that apple tree that we thought was supposed to magically appear, lots of us get discouraged and in some cases move away from what God has called us to. How do I know? Because that's one of the things that has started to happen for me. And God had to remind me, hey, watch this. Watch this. Y'all got to catch this one, y'all, please. One of the things that God did for me, and it was a blessing, was that all of the things that he, in terms of a career, right? In terms of a career, all of the things that God had moved me out of, the bridges were burned. Not that I left a bad report behind, or a bad, I didn't leave, I wasn't fired, and, we didn't dislike each other. It was just in some way, shape, form, or fashion, those bridges were burned, those doors were closed, never to open again. Why? So I wouldn't even have a thought or idea that I can go back. Somebody better catch that. Because your greatness, watch this, is going to cause for you to be patient, be committed, be consistent, and kill the thought of this is taking so long, so maybe I should go back. Maybe I can go back. Maybe he didn't say this to go back to that which God had told us to leave and go to this other place. We got to get this. We got to get this in our thought processes and incorporate this into our lives. Wherever God has called you to, he didn't tell you to go back to where he brought you from. Wow. That's another episode. All right. The next thing about greatness in Noah, he was focused. He was focused. In spite of all of the noise that was going on all around him, even in his own household, because there's no account that said that Noah's sons helped him. There's no account that speaks to Noah's daughter-in-laws helping him build this ark. There's no account that speaks to that, right? So what were they doing? I'm sure they weren't just sitting next to him watching. They had to be doing some other stuff that would speak to them not even, I'm gonna get to that part, them not even believing in what God had called Noah to. But Noah kept going. He stayed focused, he stayed committed, and he stayed consistent. Greatness is going to cause for you to do that. And you have to stay humbled. You got to be teachable, y'all. Greatness calls for you to be teachable. The minute that you get to a place where you feel like you know everything, that's when you're going to realize you know absolutely nothing. And greatness says, I need to learn. Because one of the things about another one of the most beautiful components and aspects to greatness is change. And how am I going to change if I'm not humble enough to learn what that change is supposed to be or look like? So you got to be humble. Noah was humbled. Noah was detail oriented because God gave him directions and details on how to build that thing. If he would have been off at one detail, that entire ark probably would have sunk. but he was detail oriented. You better catch it. In building upon what God has called you to and who God says that you are, you got to be detail oriented in building it and maintaining it. You got to. The other thing, and I'm gonna land a plane after this. Again, Noah didn't have any help. He stayed moving. He didn't have any support. He stayed moving. He was ridiculed. He stayed moving. He was talked about. He stayed moving. He continued to do what God had called him to do in spite of all of the madness that was going on, even in his own household. Noah kept it moving. And that's one of the greatest examples of what greatness looks like. Y'all got to excuse me because now my gardener is out there cutting my grass while I'm in the midst of creating this episode. And I just can't stop it because the spirit is moving. And I'm hoping y'all hearing this because this is very important to each and every one of us. I said it today to some people that I was talking to, and I'm going to say it again. The reason why we are all still alive, everybody who's listening to this episode, is because your purpose and the plans that God has had for your life, they are not done. They are still in motion. How do we get in line so that we can start to walk in the greatness that God has called each and every one of us to? We got to take into account some of the things that Noah has done, because like I said, one of the greatest examples of greatness in the earliest times that I can look at before Jesus is Noah. With that being said, the plane has landed. What you gonna do about your greatness? Because again, we need you to walk in the greatness and the extraordinary potential that God has called you to. With that being said, Coach Paul loves every last one of y'all, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Until we meet again, please be well, do the next right thing. God bless you all. And if you're looking for a butt, it's going to always be easy to find one. I'm signing out. Deuces.